I'm Scott Allen Miller, and this is Sam IT. And on today's episode, I want to talk about how much people hate change. But actually, I want to talk about it in a little bit different context than most people normally do. And that is that I believe that people actually hate the idea of change more than they hate change itself. And I know this sounds counterintuitive, and for sure, people hate change. That's a pretty safe statement. One of the things that makes us valuable as IT professionals is that our job in many cases is to manage change. It's one of the things we do every day, whether it's patching servers or updating software, implementing new network standards, or changing what software we use, evaluating different vendors. All of those things are just ways that we approach change and decide when change makes sense for our environment, implementing those changes, and helping the people in our environment or the environment itself to adapt to change. So change management as a theoretical greater concept is a huge component of being in IT, and the best IT professionals or the happiest IT professionals are often going to be those who are able to embrace change and view it as opportunity rather than a risk. Even though it is always a risk, it is also always an opportunity. But in today's example, I want to talk about when you talk to especially end users, right? That's the context that we care about. But whether it's business owners or end users, often when you're talking to people and you bring up the concept of change, well, we might change our ERP. Maybe we should change what software we're using for video editing. They're going to panic always. Oh my gosh, change, that carries all this cost. I don't want to change. And I hate change, and people hate change. They're going to be bad with change. And it's true. But often when we actually make the changes, you find that people dislike the change, but they're often surprised by how easy it is, or they're able to accept that they're changing for a good reason, saving money or increased productivity over the long run, even if they have to adapt how they work or learn to use a different tool or do a different job. Most people actually manage the change pretty well once it's starting to happen. They don't like it necessarily, but they handle it okay. But when you introduce the change, the amount of panic that you get is often abnormally or incongruently high compared to how much the change actually ends up impacting people once it's happened. And I want to give an example today because this was so perfect. And it's not the first time I've had this happen, but today was just such a perfect example. And it's a specific case, which I'll bring up because it's worth noting, and I'll throw it into the title to get some clickbait. But it's so common that people assume Microsoft Excel is simply a requirement for business. Everybody uses it. Everybody knows it. You hear these things said, and it's common. Now, of course, if you work in IT, you're probably aware that Excel is not believed to be the market leader anymore. It's in second place, maybe third, globally, with Google Sheets being number one, LibreOffice being very big, Zoho Office Suite being very big. There's WorkDrive. There's lots of competitors out there that are doing quite well. Excel may make the most money because it's the most expensive, but it's not the most deployed, at least not number one, as far as we know. It's impossible to tell because the concept of deployment has changed. But when you talk to people casually, it's very easy to figure out that the majority of people are using Google Sheets vastly more than any other platform. When you talk to business, you will often hear, well, we have to have Excel. We deploy Excel everywhere. It's what people know. They use all these tools. They can't change, not reasonably. They could. No one's saying they couldn't change, right? But the cost of changing, the pushback, all of those things would be so enormous. We can't do it, or it's just unrealistic. And that's what came up today. This concept of they use Excel every day, it's so ingrained in their business processes that they couldn't reasonably change their processes, and the people that they have couldn't reasonably retrained for something else. And as we were discussing, but this is how much it costs. But other companies don't have to do this. Trust me, other companies aren't doing this, right? Not that no one uses it, but lots don't. They started explaining their processes, and we said, that's not Excel that you're explaining. That's Google Sheets. At some point in the past, and they all started laughing hysterically when they realized what they had done. At some point years ago, they stopped using Excel and started using Google Sheets, the very program we were recommending to them in this particular instance. And they had never paid attention to the fact that they changed. The change was so easy that they didn't even know they had made it. The person who had enacted the change didn't know that she had enacted it. She didn't know she had moved her company to a different product. She didn't know she was using it every day. She started describing how they used it that very day and thought Google Sheets was Excel, realized she's not even aware if they have Excel or where it is, and it's just something they say. And while it's a funny anecdote, And it's completely true, and it's something we need to understand. We will get pushback from businesses, one, that they hate change more than is reasonable, and two, that they are stuck with or tied to things that are often untrue. I've been told so many times that companies can't change off of software and then watch them either do so easily, find out they never used the product at all, or have already changed and just didn't want to admit it. But in this case, what we really see, what's really the good takeaway here is that the idea of change caused panic. It was, how could a change, no matter how simple we say it is, no matter how trivial, no matter how common, change was such a scary thing. But the actual change that had already happened was so minor they didn't notice. And they believed that they were so entrenched that change was going to be a technical problem. They weren't evaluating it, right? They weren't considering what they really used. They weren't considering what change would actually take. They weren't considering the benefits because they had done all that and made the change. They simply emotionally felt change coming and were putting up roadblocks that didn't exist. And it's really important. All of those roadblocks were false. They had to be because they weren't using that product. Their perception of the change was so dramatic that they were not going to consider it until they realized they had already done it. And so as a takeaway, there's a lot we have to work with here. But as IT professionals, we have to understand that when we propose change, it's going to cause panic. When we're managers, when we're owners of companies, when we're CEOs, and we get told about change, we need to not panic. We need to stop and say, I'm going to react adversely to the concept of change, and it's probably a false emotional reaction, and I need to be careful not to push down onto the business my fear of change that may have no basis in reality, right? We all have an emotional fear of change. Overcoming that makes us better IT professionals. It makes us far better business people. As business people, one of the most important things we can do when we represent a business, whether we're an owner, a CEO, a COO, a CIO, a CFO, or anybody who works for one, everyone down the chain, but the higher up you go, the more important it is, not acting emotionally, acting rationally, not throwing the business under the bus because we don't like the idea of change, but stopping and saying, oh, what would the change really entail? What are the benefits? What are the costs? Are there costs to change? Of course. There's always going to be a cost to change. But we wouldn't be proposing a change if we didn't believe there was a benefit. And logically, we wouldn't be proposing that benefit if we didn't think that benefit outweighed the cost. Now, a business may say we can't absorb the upfront cost of change, even though we know there's a long-term savings to it. But generally, when that's said, it's an emotional reaction, because the sooner you accept the cost of a change, the longer you have to benefit from whatever you were going to benefit from that change, right? If you're going to save money each month, you want to start saving right away, not hold that off. And so that emotional reaction is a dangerous one at every step. As IT professionals, we need to know that it's going to happen. We need to soften the blow. We need to remind people we're going to talk about a change. Don't act emotionally. Be prepared. Right? It's going to feel much worse than it actually is. Here's a video to watch about how easy sometimes change can be. IT is not doing change for the sake of change. We don't like it either, right? We're trying to improve because our job is to make the company make more money, and we can't do that by not changing ever, right? If everybody just made their maximum money by status quo, I don't even have to finish that thought. So remember that change is often far easier than the thought of change. And keep in mind that Excel is not something you absolutely need, no matter how much different components of your staff or management team or users tell you, I have to have Excel. Nothing else will do the job. How could I possibly learn another tool? Chances are they've already learned another tool and just don't want to tell you, or haven't told themselves. Thanks for joining me. Please remember to like and subscribe, and look below. I do have a book out. If you are interested in supporting me in a more financial way, go on Amazon and pick up Linux Administration Best Practices from Packt Publishing, written by me. That would be wonderful. And I will see you in the next video.